The clang of iron on iron rang through the dusty air, and the earth trembled beneath the weight of marching feet. Blood-soaked fields stretched as far as the eye could see, littered with the broken bodies of fallen warriors. At the center of it all, where the fiercest fighting raged, stood a figure whose very presence seemed to ignite the battlefield. His armor gleamed red, as if stained by the blood of countless battles, and in his eyes there flickered a terrible, consuming fire. This was Ares, the god of war, reveling in the chaos and carnage that followed wherever he walked. To the ancient Greeks, Ares was more than a god. He was the embodiment of war itself. His name struck fear into soldiers' hearts, for he represented not the noble cause of defending one's land, but the sheer brutal lust for bloodshed. While gods like Athena symbolized the strategic, intellectual side of warfare, Ares stood for its raw, primal force, the madness that overtook men when steel met flesh, when the thrill of battle drowned out reason, and when the only law was survival. Ares was not a beloved god. Even among the Olympians, he was seen as destructive, driven by an insatiable hunger for violence. His very presence on the battlefield was enough to turn the tide of any conflict. Not because he brought victory, but because his essence fanned the flames of hatred, driving men to fight until death claimed them all. Ethnographically, the Greeks saw in Ares the dangers of unbridled aggression and the futility of violence for its own sake. Yet in their world of constant conflict, they also recognized that Ares was an inescapable part of life. He was war, and war was inevitable. The myths that surround Ares paint a picture of a god whose strength was matched only by his fury. He fought not for glory or justice, but for the pure pleasure of it. His temper was notorious, and his clashes with other gods often bordered on recklessness. In the Iliad, Ares is described as the bane of both gods and mortals, a reckless force who fights without purpose other than to stoke the fires of chaos. Even Zeus, his father, viewed him with disdain, calling him the most hated of the gods. Yet, for all his flaws, Ares was a necessary evil. War, in all its brutality, was an inescapable reality of the ancient world. Cities rose and fell by the sword, empires were forged in blood, and the fate of nations was often decided by who could muster the greater force. The Greeks, ever pragmatic, understood that while Ares was terrifying, he was also a force that could not be ignored. His domain, like war itself, was unpredictable, cruel, and without mercy. But it was also essential to the survival of a people who lived in a world of shifting alliances and constant strife. Ares was not alone in his bloodlust. By his side often rode Deimos, terror, and Phobos, fear, his sons who embodied the psychological horrors of war. Together, they would sweep across the battlefield like a storm, their presence filling the hearts of men with dread. Where Ares went, they followed, spreading panic among the ranks, turning battle into chaos. The Greeks understood that war was not just a physical contest, but a psychological one. The terror and confusion sown by Ares and his sons were just as deadly as any sword or spear. Though many feared and loathed him, Ares was not without his own passions. His infamous love affair with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, revealed a different side of the god of war. Their union was a paradox, love and war, passion and violence intertwined. In this relationship, the Greeks saw the duality of human nature, that in the heat of battle, there could also be beauty, that from the destruction of war, new life could emerge. Ares and Aphrodite's love was dangerous, passionate, and all-consuming, just like war itself. For mortals, invoking Ares was a double-edged sword. To call on the god of war was to invite both strength and devastation. Ares was a god who did not care for the righteousness of a cause, he cared only for the fight. The Greeks knew that to invoke him was to ask for the fire of battle to be stoked, and they did so with the full knowledge that Ares's favor was unpredictable. He might lend his strength, but he was just as likely to abandon a fight as quickly as he had joined it, leaving the battlefield in ruin. In battle, Ares showed no favorites. He fought for both sides, reveling in the carnage, his thirst for blood undiminished by the morality of the conflict. His delight came not from victory, but from the destruction itself. Ethnographically, this reflected a deep understanding within Greek culture that war was a force unto itself. Once unleashed, it could not be controlled. It would consume all in its path, indifferent to the reasons behind it. leaving only devastation in its wake. For all his might, Ares was not invincible. His arrogance often led to his downfall, as was the case when the hero Diomedes, guided by Athena, wounded him on the battlefield during the Trojan War. Ares fled to Olympus, howling in pain, a reminder that even the god of war could be bested by mortal courage and divine wisdom. This moment captured the Greeks' ambivalence toward Ares. They feared his power, but they also believed that war, though necessary, should always be tempered by reason and strategy. In the end, Ares is a god who reflects the darkest, most chaotic aspects of the human experience. He is war in its most brutal, unforgiving form, a force that tears down civilizations as easily as it builds them. He represents the bloodlust that drives men to battle, the primal instincts that stir in the heart when the clash of swords fills the air, and the destruction that inevitably follows. Yet he also stands as a reminder of the complex relationship humans have with conflict. For the Greeks, war was both a curse and a necessity, and in Ares they found a god who was both feared and revered, loathed and respected. To invoke Ares is to confront the harsh reality of war, a force that shapes history, breaks empires, and defines the fate of mortals and gods alike. He is not the hero of the battlefield, but its storm, ever raging, ever thirsting for more. Ares, the bloodlust of battle and the heart of war, is a god whose presence is felt whenever steel meets flesh, and whose legacy echoes in the destruction and rebirth that follows every conflict.